Welcome to Retro Groove. Enjoy your voyage.
Howdy and welcome to Retro Groove. I'm Adam.
And I'm Liam.
And this is a podcast where we talk about music that stands the test of time, the albums and artists that have shaped and reshaped the sonic landscape, as well as covering new music from those artists. Welcome to episode 21. We have reached drinking age. Mm-hmm. We are excited coming off of not only our Weird Al episode, but our first kind of mini episode, what we call our 45. Unfortunately, due to tragic circumstances surrounding the loss of Taylor Hawkins, beloved rock and roll drummer. And now we kind of move on to some new territory for us and are going to do a deep dive into our first ever composer episode. Yeah. We're going to be talking about John Williams and his long career and legacy, at least one of the biggest and widely recognized composers of modern times. I probably honestly couldn't even name 5 composers that are still alive off the top of my head, but he's definitely the biggest and most widely recognized. And we welcome friend of the podcast, Alfred Shulz, aboard. He's going to join us for our John Williams discussion on side B. But for now, Liam, what's going on, man?
Doing pretty good. I went to a record release, like in-store thing.
Cool. Those are always fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously been a very long time. And like you had to pre-order the vinyl and do like that whole thing, which I was, it was an album I was excited for. It was by this artist Kevin Devine, who I've always loved. It's been a while since he put out new music, and it was cool, the purple vinyl, the whole thing. But because it was early, it was 7:00, and it was at our local record store here, and my wife also loves him. We've tried to bring our daughter out to stuff like this. We went to like outdoor music things with her a couple times, and kid-friendly situations. Yeah, and in the past, these in-stores have been like the artist playing 4 or 5 songs and then doing some handshakes, the grin and grip. And we brought her. All 3 of us went. We got there and we were standing around for a bit. And he gets up on stage and he's talking to the owner, and they're all excited about the new, like, coming back to playing music in the store. Right. And he asks the owner, Carl, how many songs he should do, and Carl's just like, "You do whatever you want, Kevin." And Kevin's like, "Well, cool. Then if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to play the whole album." Which
nice.
Which is cool. Except then I looked at my wife and I'm like, yeah, she's not going to make it through this. I mean, you're going to sit here for 50 minutes, like, and chat and all that kind of stuff. Uh-huh. Like, so about halfway through, like, basically when he turned the record over and he stopped and he told us, like, this is when you turn the record over and go to side B. That's my wife, like, scooped my daughter up and took off. But I stayed for the rest of the thing. It was really cool. There was like 40 or 50 people there. Nice. And while I was there, so I told a story a couple weeks ago about how I was digging through the new Arrivals bin, and I don't know why it never dawned on me to do this. And I do slightly chalk this up to Dan, Retrologic Dan, for getting me into the headspace of doing something like that on eBay where you look for the new listings and the ending soonest to like see what's popping.
Right.
And so I kind of started doing that in my local record store, and I found like a rare Blink-182 album a couple weeks ago, and then this week I came across like a pretty decently priced, I think it was like $10, this Phoebe Bridgers EP that came out about a year and a half ago. It was like a remix EP of some songs from her second album, but other than her two albums, like she hasn't really put out a bunch of weird vinyl stuff. There's not a whole lot out there in her discography, and the album artwork's really cool, and it's a nice like orchestral remixing of some of her songs.
Oh, cool.
So I think it goes for like $35-$40, and like her star is only rising, and it's going to get harder and harder to find her stuff, I think.
It seems like
and
it.
so I just like was flipping through, and I was like, what is this? Oh my gosh. And so I just scooped that up, and I actually I swapped out, like in secret, because my wife's a huge Phoebe Bridgers fan. So in secret, like I snuck it into the house, and I went into our room, and there's a bunch of album art and stuff around the room, and I swapped one out, and I made it a little thing with my daughter. I was like, don't tell mommy that I did this. Let's see how long it takes until she realizes it. Yeah, it was kind of fun.
That's fun.
After about 2 days, she realized it. Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, so that was cool. And then I spent too much money this week on video game vinyl, which we were posting and talking about in the Discord. But it was two really good releases. I mean, Grant Kirkhope's Banjo-Kazooie soundtrack, like, and it's him like redoing it basically, or like re-recording those songs. And it's like autographed vinyl by him, and the whole limited pressing and all that, and it was only $60 I think in total for everything. So not the worst,
not terrible.
Yeah, I'm not like the biggest autograph guy. Like I have autographs. It's not a thing that I like go crazy spending money on, but I don't think I'll ever meet this guy. I love a lot of his music, and it was there, and it was like a $10 add-on, and I'm like, yeah, just go for it, whatever.
Yeah, might as well.
But that's one of those. It's not coming for like months. Like I'm gonna see this at the end of the year, and I just have to remember that it's coming.
Yeah, it's a long wait, but
yeah,
it'll be worth it.
But Firewatch is a game that I love. It's like very immersive, like walking sim kind of game that'll get in your head. I've played through it 2 or 3 times, and I love the music of it. And there was a vinyl pressing that I didn't know about that the composer had done back in 2020, and I must have missed it on Twitter. Like I must have been off Twitter or something, because I saw it a couple weeks after it had closed, and the prices of those, then once they did ship out in 2021, all shot up to like 150
instantly.
Crazy. And he said he'd have leftovers and then like a repress or something. And so I've had Twitter notifications on. I've been hunting this thing, Adam, like waiting for him to post that it's going to go live. And it happened this past week where he's like, this Friday, I'm going to put them up. And dude, I was at work. Like I was at work, and I like had a 1:00 meeting that I needed to like step away from for a second to be like, I've got something very important to do. Like, ran down the hall to like sit on my phone and make sure I got the thing ordered. But I got it ordered, and that is actually shipping out in like a week. So that's
nice,
really cool. And then the last 2 things I want to talk about, I've been out to see more shows. I saw Glassjaw and Earth Crisis. Like, it was just a crazy hardcore show again, just to be back in that space of people nearly kicking themselves in the head and really working it out. But it sounded great. Didn't make it into
the pit, huh?
No, I didn't make it into the pit. And then I went to go see Car Seat Headrest the other night. I didn't know. I didn't know he's like been wearing this gas mask thing and like dressing in a hazmat suit, but the cool thing
he does some silly stuff.
Yeah, and they sounded so good. I mean, I hate to identify it this way, but I'm gonna do it. like in watching the production and listening to like the quality of everything, it was almost like indie rock Coldplay. It was like so dialed in and so well executed between the lighting and the sound and like the pageantry of it all, where I was like, man, he's entertaining us right now. This isn't like a guy who's staring at his shoes and whatever. Like he is, this band is going all out. Yeah, it was great. It sounds more like, I mean, the band to me sounds like if the Strokes had been signed to like Doghouse or Vagrant Records, where it's just got that kind of like emo-ish leaning of that era, but has that garage sound. I mean, he's got a little bit of a Julian Casablancas thing going on.
Yeah, definitely.
But I dig the music. It's really good. Such a good performer. And just, I guess the last thought on all of that is, and I apologize if I tread over this at one point before, but like,
no, go ahead.
Been soaking up the lighting director situation at shows. I think it's like going back to seeing live music, and like I'm feeling hyper aware of things more so than maybe I had kind of gotten numbed to in the past. And so while I'm sitting there and the light show is so great, I'm looking over at the soundboard, and there's the guy who's doing the room sound, right? And then there's the guy next to him who's doing all the lighting.
The lights.
And that is impressive. Like, it is hitting me hard how much of an integral like band member the lighting person is for these shows, where they need to know the beats, they need to know the songs, because they are crafting the visual to coincide with the audio.
Yeah, it's like they're playing an instrument alongside the band, so they have to know the songs just as well.
It feels like, I guess the best lighting director feels like an automaton, right? Like you go in there, and if you're not thinking about the lighting and it's just hitting you, then you don't even maybe think that there's a guy who's actually physically triggering all this stuff, and it's not just some kind of computer program that's running it. Like, it is crafted in real time.
Because a band could take a left turn and, like, you know, keep a breakdown going longer than initially planned, or, you know, they might go back and do some crowd interaction, so there has to be this like repeating whatever, and just like the other members of the band playing instruments have to kind of be tuned in to the band leader, so does the lighting guy. And it's I always think about that because, and I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm a former drama techie. So I've been in that light booth and I've done that stuff. So it's always something that I, you know, along with the whole, you know, sound mixing part of it, I'm always thinking about that as well. But it's a very specific talent, and it goes almost completely unnoticed by the majority of people.
Yeah, and I think, so what hit me about it in this instance that really struck me is the mask that Will from Car Seat Headrest is wearing has this interactive LED eye setup. So like it looks like his eyes are these circles or these things, but the lighting is controlled on the mask, is controlled by the lighting director at the board, and so it's changing, and it's in connection with all the other lighting that's going on. And so if the lights were spinning pink, all of a sudden his eyes turned pink and swirled, and you're like, how are you doing this? This is crazy. It's like this new level of integration. It was very impressive. So it's just another cool, like, wow, I can't believe what is being presented to me. You know, like I can't, like the thought that went into this, and then the actual execution of it is amazing. Man. What about you?
Oh man, this is sound tame in comparison. I did make it out to one of my locals, and I got them right here, but I actually, I always feel like I miss out on the new release, or not the new release, but the like new arrivals section at the record store. But that this past particular week, I ended up making it pretty early on a Monday, which is rare for me. I had something to do in the late morning, so I thought I would kind of get out earlier and hit the record store, before the crowds do. And
It's picked clean.
Yes, and I got some
Hey,
Tom Petty.
I see Tom Petty.
So I grabbed.
Look at him.
How young! Look at how young he is. This is
my
the
gosh.
first album, the Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, from '76, I believe.
Amazing.
And of course, this one has Breakdown and
Yeah.
American Girl. So this is just a classic record, his first. And then they had another one which kind of goes a little bit less appreciated, but they had his 1982 album Long After Dark. And I love this record because it has You Got Lucky on
It's
it.
a great song.
Which is weirdly my favorite Tom Petty song.
Wow.
And so I had to get that one. I mean, okay, so some days it's a toss-up between that and Last Dance with Mary Jane, or Mary Jane's Last Dance, I think is the actual
Yeah.
title. But it's one of my favorites, so I'm super happy to finally have these on vinyl. Tom Petty weirdly absent from my personal collection for a long time, so I'm happy to have rectified that egregious error.
Yeah, I definitely came around to, or like learned my appreciation of him too late. Like I 100%, like I said, I missed out on seeing him. I skipped it. It was a late night and I'm like, whatever. I'll see Tom Petty some other time. And then you don't. You Got Lucky. So the only reason that I know that song, I was posting about it in Discord. So the Gaslight Anthem have reunited. It's one of my favorite bands of all time. And they covered that song as a B-side to this great album of theirs.
Oh,
and I
cool.
remember listening to it and being like, this isn't a Gaslight Anthem song. What is this? And like flipping into what this like deluxe, what is this stuff? And finding out it was a Petty song, and then going and discovering Long After Dark. And it is a really good album. There's a bunch of good stuff on there.
There's a bunch of great. That's like the
Straight
quote
Into
unquote hit
Darkness,
from the
yeah.
album, but
Yeah.
no, it's a good album just in its own right. But that's cool. I'm gonna have to look up the
It's so
Gaslight.
good.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up. Sounds really fun. That's it as far as purchases, but Dan mentioned in the Discord a band that I was really, really into when I was, working at Newbury Comics in 2000, 2001. It's this band called Quasi, which is Sam Coombs on his weird organ keyboards that he does through distortion pedals and whatnot. And Janet Weiss on drums, who most people would know as the former drummer of Sleater-Kinney. And they had this band called Quasi. It was just the two of them. And really interesting and fun kind of indie rock music. Obviously, with, heavy drums that she does, and this really kind of unique, interesting, maybe a little bit kind of borrowing some influence from the Doors with the sound of the keyboard and the.
All right.
It's just really, really fun and melodic. And so I was listening to them and I was like, oh man, so Janet's no longer, there was that whole falling out with Sleater-Kinney and her feeling like, the other two women were kind of not following the direction that she wanted to go. So she kind of bowed out, and I was like, oh, she's got to be doing something cool. Right. So they are going back out on tour, and that led me to the discovery that Sam Coombs and, of all people, John Spencer of the John Spencer Blues Explosion have this band called John Spencer and the Hitmakers.
Oh, man.
I mean, it's just got to be in his clause that any band that John Spencer is in has to start with John Spencer.
John Spencer.
But I mean, well deserved, right?
Sure.
But I had no knowledge of this. So John Spencer and the Hitmakers is John Spencer and Sam Coombs doing their thing with their vocals and other members doing some amazing stuff. But it's so cool just to have that combination of the crazy, kind of groovy, kind of funky garage wildness that John Spencer brings, along with that melodic organ keyboard stuff that Sam Coombs does, and Sam's vocals playing off of John's vocals. And it's really, really cool. And I was just learning about this last week, and they have an album coming out on April 1st, which was just a few days later. So I've been listening to that. And man, everybody else, like family members and my kids and everybody else in the car, they hate this record. They're like, what is, because it's, if you know anything about John Spencer, he sings and plays and sounds like going back and forth between a werewolf and Elvis Presley.
That's really good, actually.
So, and it's like, if you're into it, you're really into it, but otherwise it's just, I don't know. I can see why it might be grating to some people.
Yeah.
So nobody else that's been in my present company has enjoyed it like I have, but I've been just eating it up. And unfortunately, they're going on tour, and unfortunately, and they're touring with Quasi. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I don't know how Sam has that kind of energy because he's in both bands. So, I'm like, okay, so they're not coming to Texas, which unfortunately has been a weird trend lately. Like a lot of bands that I'm noticing are on tour are not coming to Texas or like even anywhere in Texas. So I'm like, what's going on?
Come on,
which I mean, makes sense. Texas, we don't need to go there, but we tend to make a lot of I don't want to lump myself in with the political decisions that get made, but Texas makes a lot of political decisions that turn off a lot of people, and I can see the decision being made, well, we're not going to go to Texas. I get it.
Sure. I'll also say that the way that ticket sales are questionable right now. They're doing better than I was afraid that they would do. I'm hearing. It sounds like people are going out, they're buying tickets or whatever. But I think that there's a concern of oversaturation even by the artists themselves. And so
I could see that.
Some artists are rolling out tour dates and then they have holds for extended legs that they haven't announced yet because they're looking to see what the response is. Yeah, but also don't want to, as awful as it sounds, they don't want to screw up one market by playing another potentially. And so I know some bands haven't announced New York City dates. They've announced Boston dates. They've announced Western New York. They've announced Philly, but they haven't announced New York City yet because they're looking to see if those sell out because they're confident that they can get the New York thing done, and they don't want to announce New York and draw from those other markets too much for the New York shows. So I don't know what the routing is for this one in particular. Maybe that applies, maybe it doesn't, but I think that could come into play with some of these where you may check back in a couple weeks and all of a sudden there'll be a new leg announced that will be routing through your area.
Could be. I mean, I'm going to keep my eye out because it literally got me thinking okay, if I'm going to go see them, I'm going to have to either drive to Colorado Springs or, hop on a plane and go visit my sister in San Diego. So that's I don't know. Yeah. But we'll see what happens.
Tough. Yeah.
I would admit that's why I was like, okay, well, I could go visit my sister because I've been meaning to go visit her anyway. It's been a long time since I've been to California, and been a long time since I've seen my sister due to COVID, and so that could be a combo trip.
But does your sister want to go see John Spencer be weird?
Well, she would probably go see anything. She's very eclectic in her music taste. We send each other stuff, and she actually introduced me to Chris Stapleton, believe it or not. So that's where I first heard of him, was through my sister. So she'll throw some knowledge at me, and I'll be like, all right, cool. And the only thing other than that is you actually mentioned the new Band of Horses record, I think last episode or the episode before. I can't even remember. But I was like, I didn't even know they had a new record out because there's so much exploding right now.
Yeah.
And so I made the point to go, because I'm a fan of theirs, and I made a point to go back and listen to it. And I was like, oh, this feels so good.
Yeah.
Like, so when I need something, when I need something chill or I need a break from John Spencer screaming in my ear, I'll put on the Band of Horses, and man, this is a good record. It's really, really good. I've been enjoying that a lot.
Probably better to drive with the family to than John Spencer, right?
Yes, I can put that on in the background,
Yeah.
and it's just like it's there and it's cool and everything. Or if it's at night, I'll put Band of Horses on because, you know, John Spencer is music to get pulled over to. That'll push you over the speed limit.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
Cool. Well, should we talk a little bit about the Grammys? You want to play a game? What feels good to you?
We can touch on the Grammys a little bit. So we're in a little bit of an awkward timing situation here because looking at the clock, but it looks like as we're recording here on the 3rd, the Grammys are still ongoing as we speak. Yeah. And, you know, there's always the debate and more as time goes on, like, why do we need these award shows? What's the point? This, that, and the other thing. But, you know, it's still interesting to see who's being recognized within the industry, who's going to upset the shoe-in and all of that. And of course, there's always, as we saw last week with the Academy Awards, there's got to be some kind of drama. You know, I don't know, you know, who's getting slapped this week, but I don't know. You never know what's going to happen. There could be some kind of iconic moment, whether it's a presenter getting slapped or somebody from a band climbing up the set piece, or an artist, you know, coming up and taking the mic out of the hand of the award winner and saying, I'm gonna let you finish. But you never know what's going to happen. There's all these moments that stem from these award shows, and whether or not the award show itself is the important thing, there's, when you go back and you talk about an artist's accomplishments, the awards that they receive are a big part of that. Mm-hmm. So that I think is at least important on some level. But you know, it's just part of the landscape of pop music. There's always going to be some kind of award show. There's always going to be some kind of, whether it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or the Grammy Awards or what have you, there's always going to be some body of decision makers recognizing artists, and there's no way that there's going to be any kind of universal agreement on this. Right. But you know, artists do deserve recognition for art that has such a widespread appeal. So it's got to be important on some level. You know, how important it is debatable. But I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm fine with the awards aspect of it. I think that as long as the dialogue is not just about who the winner is, but spotlighting an interesting swath in representative categories that maybe are constantly being evaluated or reevaluated to make sure that they hold up with where the industry is going, which has been a note of conversation for years now, making sure that certain genres and such are represented. Right. One of the big things that comes up a lot with stuff like this is what is televised and what isn't. And for years, the issue was that, and it's still to this point, I mean, so we're talking about when we're taping this show, most of the awards have already been given out. Like what has been happening now,
and they're not going to be aired either.
Yeah, is the pageantry. I mean, we know that the Foo Fighters swept the entire rock category. They won performance, song, and album just straight out. But what we don't know is what they've done on the stage to celebrate Taylor. I'm hearing there is something that they're doing, but we don't know anything like that. But there was always this outrage about what awards were and were not televised. I wonder how relevant that is anymore. So seeing a bunch of performances, that's always fun. As I've said, I have an appreciation for the pageantry of it. but there is this air of self-indulgence by the industry
Right.
when this awards show happens that makes it feel less authentic and more staged in a it just doesn't feel authentic. It just feels
Right.
like this churn of music commercials almost sometimes.
Yeah.
But there are moments. I mean, we know that John Baptiste is really getting his the spotlight that he deserves as an artist right now in this one. He's won a bunch of awards. He's nominated for like 11 Grammys, and he's winning a ton of them. That's great. Like, he's fantastic. But again, it's less the focus, taking the focus away from just who the winner is and taking a look at those other bullets of who else has been nominated and going through there and being like, okay, well, St. Vincent won and that album is amazing, but it's cool that Japanese Breakfast is in that mix, you know? It's cool that Fleet Foxes is on there. It's cool that Arlo Parks is on there. Like, those
For sure.
are names. Those are names of people who maybe they walked the red carpet for the first time. Maybe Extra, does that still exist? Entertainment, whatever. Like, maybe
that kind of stuff.
Maybe Mario Lopez has to learn who Japanese Breakfast is for a minute, you know? Like, so there's ways that this does maybe impact things positively. But yeah, I can't watch them. The self-indulgent nature of it all. But like I mentioned, I mean, the St. Vincent album was great. That's a tough category for me because it's Arlo. I love the Fleet Foxes album, but Arlo Parks' album was so great. It was weird to see Halsey nominated in that one. She's having a moment in like redefining her space from pop to kind of like Machine Gun Kelly, like blurring lines a little bit, but having Halsey as an alternative music artist kind of redefines for me what alternative might be considered, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just you do kind of have to wonder what is alternative then when you're seeing, I guess, alt pop almost from a predominant pop star.
I mean, we didn't even have a clear definition of what alternative was in the late 90s when it, you know what I mean? It was like alternative was just like this entire just kind of amalgam of, well, it's not just straight up pop and it's not just straight up rap and it's not just straight up rock and roll, you know? So you could have, Alanis Morissette is alternative. Or Nirvana is alternative. Like, you have all of these artists that nowadays might have definitive genres, just kind of all in this mixing bowl of, you know, miscellaneous, because the music landscape was changing and the categorizing nature of it didn't know how to handle it. So alternative was and kind of still is this catch-all. And the new quote unquote alternative is indie. There's no real definite, you know, obviously that implies an independent artist, you know, doing their own thing without a label or having their own label or what have you. But like,
which
quote
often
unquote,
isn't the case anymore.
No, of course not. Indie rock, quote unquote, is as corporate as any other genre is. So, you know, it is what it is. And it's funny that there even still is an alternative genre in the award ceremony, because it's like, what does that even mean? It's just, it's not a genre. It's just kind of a miscellaneous bin.
And I'll also say that I feel like I could be way off base here, but I feel like in my recollection of the Grammys years ago, it felt like the categories were always very frustrating because they were tight. It was like five nominees or something to a category. And when you look now, like Record of the Year, I think has 10, you know, it's across a bunch of genres. It's ABBA, it's Jean Baptiste, it's Bieber, Brandy Carlisle, Billie Eilish, Lil Nas X. Like, it's pretty representative of a nice wide swath of, obviously there's stuff missing, but like a wide swath of what is popular or resonating with people. And to that end, like, it seems like Olivia Rodrigo ultimately will have a really big night. she had a huge album this past year. It makes a lot of sense. So the awards are representing what is popular at the moment.
Right.
But as you see that, like Silk Sonic, that album is fantastic, and they're winning a bunch of awards too. So it does seem like this, so far, the awards this year are nicely representing a good balance of, and it's not just dominated by one artist. Which is cool. A few of the highlights real quick that I've seen. I mean, you know that I'm going to bring up the fact that Tyler took Best Rap Album.
It is.
I agree that it is. So
of course, that was your album of 2021.
Full stop.
Has to be.
Full stop.
Good for him.
Props to Chris Stapleton. He basically swept country. I mean, he couldn't win the duo. I don't even know if he was nominated for the duo. I guess he technically could have done if there was something on his album for that. But album, performance, and song took all of that.
Nice.
I don't know anything about this. I need to figure out what this Stuart Copeland album is. He won a New Age Grammy. Like,
yeah, I know nothing about
I don't know what
this.
that is. I have to find out about this. So when we're done here, I'm going to go and dig in. And did you fall into, during the pandemic, the Bo Burnham vibe of everything? I
mean, I definitely watched it and enjoyed it. It wasn't too much of a surprise for me. I know it kind of came out of left field for a lot of people, and I'm not trying to be a hipster about it or anything, but I was a fan of his since like the Vine days. In, you know, his kind of brand of comedy.
Like 10 years ago too, right?
Yeah.
Like a while, yeah.
So, and then he actually, you know, dipped out for a while. And then he came back, and he really came back and resonated with a lot of people with Inside, and I really enjoyed it. And I think he does deserve the award, honestly. I'm glad he's getting recognized.
Yeah,
Not
it's
much
just
else
weird.
to say about it.
It wasn't like a comedy award. The comedy award, I don't even think he was nominated for it because it was a musical special and it wasn't like a stand-up special, so I don't think he technically was eligible. But the comedy Grammy went to Louis C.K., which is, I feel like that's going to be a whole conversation that's going to be had going forward that we don't need to delve into. Yeah, so
interesting.
I don't know what's going to happen there. But congrats to everybody who won. Congrats to everybody who was actually nominated, because that's huge.
Huge.
And I look forward to watching some of the highlights, because I do appreciate that. You know, like, curate a few performance highlights and then give me a nice swath of albums to look at to make sure I didn't miss anything this year. Because there's usually stuff on here that either I don't know about or I had kind of intended to listen to and hadn't gotten around to it, and it's a nice way to kind of reflag it for yourself and be like, oh yeah, that should have been on my radar. I missed that.
It's the Stuart Copeland album for me. I had no clue.
I got to find out what that is. Yeah,
I had no idea. We'll look into that for sure.
Yeah, the one other thing I wanted to flag was there's this interesting kind of piece that I came across about Third Man Records and what they're doing right now. They pressed the first ever Motown record, like physically made Motown artist vinyl in Detroit. It was never ever made there. And so it's pretty cool. They've got their record pressing plant, and we've talked a bunch about the backlog and issues of getting vinyl records made right now. And Jack White is making this plea within this piece, and in multiple interviews, he's now come about just saying, like, they're the big dogs, Universal, Sony, Warner, kind of, he's saying that they really should have their own pressing plant. Like, they're capitalizing on this movement, and they're clogging up the channels with their hundreds of thousands of orders, and so you have these smaller bands, these little bands who could be selling vinyl and making a living, you know, touring and selling merch on the road, and they can't get their stuff made for a year.
I still have an album that I ordered back in June of last year that is still nowhere, you know, anywhere close to being manufactured yet. So
Yeah.
something's got to give. So got to agree with Jack White on this one.
Yeah. When it does show up, though, it's going to be like you're going to have forgotten about it, and it's going to be like a Christmas present. I love those
Yeah.
sometimes. Like my limited run games where I get a box and I'm like, I don't even know what this is. What did I buy?
Yep.
This is
Exactly.
a year ago.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know. It
we
should
got a
be
couple-
that way, though. It really
Yeah.
shouldn't.
Yeah.
We need to, order something and get it, not order something and, well, now we have to worry about manufacturing it. Could be, 6 months to however long. And
Right.
yeah, a year and a half for this,
Yeah.
for this
long time.
record. It's a long time.
Yeah. Better be a good record.
Would we want to hit some music history?
Yeah, let's do it.
The couple of quick, major losses, unfortunately, but, worthy of mention and kind of interesting that they're right around the same time. But April 8th, the day that this is going to air, 1994, Kurt Cobain was found dead of apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound at his Seattle home. Obviously, rocked the music world much in the same way that Taylor Hawkins' recent passing was so shocking and unexpected and has rocked the music world this past week. I mean, it's interesting because I was like 12 at the time and I definitely knew who he was, but it was almost like a new concept. Like I didn't even quite grasp what suicide even was at that point.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a weird,
That's a good point.
it was a weird moment for me in my upbringing, somebody that you listen to someone's music long enough, you feel like you know them, you know what I mean? To a certain extent. And he definitely kind of similar to Taylor, felt a little bit more like, less like a rock star and more like somebody that you could like sit down and have a normal conversation with. So to learn that it was an apparent suicide, that kind of hit, a 12-year-old boy into rock and roll pretty hard, and it was very kind of confusing actually for me at the time. I don't know if I know I'm a little bit older than you. I don't know if you have any recollection of that.
A little bit. I feel like there was a run of, or I feel like it was kind of sequential, even though they're obviously completely unrelated. But I vaguely remember the Cobain death. It had a good amount of media coverage, obviously. I think of Selena, who I think that was not too long after that, where I remember
It was around the same time,
some coverage of that. But where things kind of then, and again, not wholly related or anything, but like the Biggie Tupac era, then I don't know, there was just this like run, probably going over 2 or 3 years, but of just like, oh my God, celebrities are dying and like they're being murdered or they're killing themselves or whatever it is. But it went from me watching TV and listening to music or whatever, and things felt unreal, where like you're still coming to grasp with the how tangible these celebrities are that you see on TV are. They don't even feel like people maybe at that point in your age, and then they're dying, and the mortality kind of, I remember that kind of hitting me a little bit, but we're like, so are a bunch of other celebrities going to die? Like, I just like, what is, how does this keep happening? Why would this happen? They're on TV. What?
Right.
What are you talking about? Yeah,
exactly.
This is so weird.
They're on TV. They can't die.
Yeah.
So
what is that? Yeah.
It's a little bit, I mean, it sounds weird, but it's kind of the same as the first major, like either family member death or pet dying in your family.
Yeah, for sure.
It's for a lot of people that grew up around the same time that we did, I mean, everyone's got that kind of first introduction to the concept of death as you can truly understand it in their lives, and whether that's a family member or whatever. But it's just kind of weird when it's somebody that kind of everybody knows.
Yeah.
So that was definitely an interesting time because, we had MTV was so ubiquitous and entertainment media was blowing up and the internet was in its kind of infancy. So things were definitely just kind of coming to this new era of media and information and stuff like that. So it was kind of strange, and things have, not gotten a whole lot, lot different since then. It just kind of increased in frequency since then, I think. So
yeah, we've almost become desensitized to it.
Exactly.
I mean, the Taylor thing, as we talked about, it hit both of us really hard. So I won't say we are desensitized, but it definitely stuff
as a
people
society
passing away,
though.
Yeah, across the board, I think that we've just kind of gotten used to it, and maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's yeah.
It's gotten real existential on this show here. So
yeah, that's the way it's gonna be.
Let's mention one more quick unfortunate passing before we move on to some birthdays, and maybe we'll lighten things up with a game. But on April 9th, just this past year, we lost DMX at the age of 50. Iconic rapper, kind of came up around the same, in the late 90s, the same kind of era that we've been talking about. And that was a big loss in the hip hop world, of course, but even as someone that wasn't a huge rap fan back then, DMX was everywhere.
Oh,
and, I definitely enjoyed some of his music that was being played, everywhere I went. And there wasn't a whole lot of rap that I was enjoying in that time frame. So that was a memorable artist for me, for sure.
Yeah, I feel like Rough Riders were, if you saw and heard that name a bunch. It wasn't Wu-Tang or anything necessarily, but they dominated MTV. Mm-hmm. Even DMX were all over MTV big time.
Yeah. And he was 50, the same age as Taylor that passed away this past week. So
yeah,
it's I think unfortunately you're right. We're just gonna as time goes on, it's just gonna kind of keep perpetuating that the artists that we grew up with, that it's just gonna happen. Yeah. It's part of life. So
you take the time to celebrate them. Yeah,
for sure. Well, enjoy your loved ones. Hug your kids.
Yeah.
You want to play a game?
Yeah, let's play a game. Yeah.
Let's play a game. We got some birthdays. Let's do the birthdays first, and then we'll decide whether we want to flip it over and play a game or try to hit the game before we flip it over to side B. So real quick, April 8th, 1947. Happy birthday to Steve Howe, guitarist for Yes. One of my favorite prog rock groups. I'm not a big I'm not super duper into Styx or Rush. If I'm naming one of my favorite prog rock acts, it's got to be Yes for me. 1962, same day, American guitarist Izzy Stradlin from Guns N' Roses. April 9th, 1980, Albert Hammond Jr. of The Strokes. We were just talking about The Strokes.
We were. Love The Strokes.
April 10th, 1950, American guitarist and singer Eddie Hazel, who played guitar with Parliament and Funkadelic. Moving on to April 10th, 1959, American guitarist, singer, songwriter, bandleader, Stray Cat himself, Brian Setzer.
Long Island Zone.
Yeah. I still want to see one of his Christmas shows. I got to.
Yeah.
At some point. Hopefully he's still out and about and doing that. And then April 10th, 1970, happy birthday to Q-Tip. And I purposefully left off his real name because
Oh boy.
Not today, but there may. So I've started to. Okay, well, I don't know if I want to mention the real name because we've got our What's in a Name game that we might want to save.
No, that's fair.
That for. But happy
fair.
birthday to Q-Tip. I love his collaboration with the Beastie Boys on
My
Ill
God.
Communication.
Ill Communication. Yeah, it's
Best.
so good. Yeah,
So
that song
good.
is so good.
But
I
of
remember.
course, go ahead.
You hear that song come on, and it feels like a Tribe song. Like
Absolutely.
it does. It's like, why is this? What is this song on here? And then when you hear them playing off of each other, it's so perfect.
It's perfect. It's awesome.
such a good, such a good track.
There should have been more of that, like cross,
Yeah.
work between Beastie Boys and Tribe, because man, that flow, they had kind of a similar
They definitely did.
aesthetic, a little bit, kind of similar flow. So that I wish they had done more of that, but maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll form a supergroup at some point, the remaining members.
Yeah, or maybe there's something that we just don't know. I mean, this stuff bubbles up from the cutting room floor that you just
Sometimes.
never. I mean, you got that whole Fife album that just came out, so you just don't know. You don't know what's out there.
And then last but not least, April 10th, 1984, happy birthday to Mandy Moore, American singer-songwriter and actress. Best known in my house as the voice of Rapunzel.
That's right. In both the movie and the TV show,
Yes.
which is nothing to snuff at because
No.
the TV show went on for like 3 seasons and
Yeah,
she did it the
props
whole
to
time,
her.
which is pretty crazy.
And she's actually
awesome.
a great singer. You know what I
She
mean?
is, and she's
could've-
married to Taylor from Dawes. Dawes, great like alt folk singer songwriter group. Who he's like the de facto torchbearer for Jackson Browne these days, to the extent that Jackson Browne took Dawes out as his backing band when he toured. And Dawes was also the backing band for Conor Oberst and a bunch of others. Fantastic group. Taylor's a wonderful songwriter and person, and it's very cool to see him with Mandy Moore, who is lovely. That's a good couple. Happy.
Cool. Very, very cool. Well, happy birthday, Mandy Moore. And we play it loosey-goosey on this show. Do you want to flip it over and do the game, or do you want to hit our game really quick?
Let's do the game now.
Yeah, let's do the game. Might as well. So, we have a little game that we play on the show called What's in a Name. And the concept is that we have each picked 4 names, and these are the birth and or legal names of artists who go by a stage name of some kind. And we'll go for a maximum of 100 points, with points docked for incorrect guesses or having to give hints. And there's nothing serious. We're just having fun here. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to throw some at you?
I'll go first.
Okay, cool.
So I've got a theme.
I like the theme thing for sure.
Theme is fun. Theme helps. Keeps things moving, but can get spicy. So first name, Robert Diggs.
Robert Diggs.
And there is a little bit of a hint in the name, but not extensively so. Let me just look real quick and see if I'm missing a middle name. Maybe there's a middle name. Oh, Robert Fitzgerald Diggs. Doesn't really help, actually. I was just wondering if there's like any sort of clue in the middle name, but I don't think so.
I have an idea,
Okay.
not knowing what the theme is or any other hints whatsoever, but I'm going to guess Rob Bass.
No.
Okay.
Not Rob Bass.
All right, so then I need a hint.
We're talking, let's see, hip hop space.
Okay, so I was close.
Yep,
I was in the right
You're in the right
headspace.
genre area. Pretty expansive, like core cornerstone in hip hop in the 90s into 2000s, but has a lot of production credits, some film and TV stuff going on, some scoring. You know, he's done a lot beyond just the hip hop space.
Robert Diggs.
Robert Diggs.
There's some kind of hint in the name. There's something there.
Yeah. I mean, the first name is slightly like, I'm assuming, I don't know where he got his name from, but I'm guessing it has something to do with his first name.
Man, I got nothing. I have no idea.
Let's see. He scored
hint number 2.
So he scored the 2 Kill Bill movies. We'll go into the film space because
I know who it is now.
Okay.
That was the giveaway for me. We're talking about RZA.
We are talking about RZA.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So
that'll be 15. We dock 5 points
15.
for each hint,
That's
right?
good.
All right.
Yeah, that's
15.
Good. Dennis Coles.
Are these all Wu-Tang members? Is that is that the theme?
No comment.
Okay.
You could guess that.
I have no idea otherwise, so I'm just gonna shoot out Method Man.
Not Method Man.
Okay. I have a feeling we have a Wu-Tang theme going on, but give me a hint.
We have a Wu-Tang theme going.
Okay.
Hint for this one. I mean, and I don't know if I've said it on here, so maybe it's not really a hint, but it definitely, as I have listened to them, especially recently, I think that he's my favorite lyricist, but like his delivery, I guess, like of them all, I think he's just consistently got this like kind of mobster mafioso thing that
For sure
is so good. This guy just every time he delivers, it's just usually his verses are the ones that you really can't have on with when the kids are in the car.
Yeah, we're of the same mind on this, and we're talking about Ghostface.
We are talking about Ghostface.
Yes.
Yeah. That is
His
Dennis
solo
Coles.
albums, I love his solo stuff. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So good.
But there's stuff like his verses come on and I'm jazzed. I love his flow. I love his delivery. But
It's
like
so
some of the
unique.
stuff he starts talking about and I'm like,
I know.
what are you saying?
Like,
he
I
just
feel
keeps
bad
going.
for even just listening to this by myself
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
car.
Yeah.
Good stuff, though.
All right. Clifford Smith Jr.
Clifford Smith Jr. Is that Method Man?
That is Method Man.
Something about the Clifford. I kind of knew that
He
at
feels a
some
little
point
bit like a Clifford,
from
right?
somewhere. I
don't know why
knew
he
that
feels like a
one
Clifford.
back in the day,
Yeah.
and it
Or a Cliff.
retained.
Yeah.
So wow, okay, home
Yeah.
run on
That's
that
good.
one.
That's a good one.
All right, we got one more, right?
Yep. Gary Grice.
Gary Grice. Who is Gary Grice?
Well, you've got
I have no
basically
idea.
6 members left. Like 5 or 6 members left, depending. I mean, like technically Capadonna's he became part of the Wu-Tang Clan. So there's technically, I think, 6 members left. So you got a good chance.
I'm gonna guess. I have no idea. I'm gonna guess ODB.
It's not ODB.
Okay. Any other hints that you can give me?
Then there's 10 members of Wu-Tang. Yeah. Okay. So then now you have 6 to choose
I lose
from.
count.
Yeah.
I lose track of them.
Yeah. So this one also has a giveaway in the name. You don't hear him a ton on the Wu-Tang albums. It's not like some of the members who are just like
All
track
over.
after track after track. But a very important member of the group. And yeah, the name does play into the name. Like
So then
Gary
I'm going
Rice.
So then I'm going with Jizza.
It's Jizza.
All right.
Yeah. Rizzo's cousin, right? Yeah.
So then I didn't know that. I didn't know that was the case. Mm-hmm. So what's that? 20, so that's 80?
Mm-hmm.
80 points?
Yeah. Yeah, 80 points.
All right. So my fumble on the first one might help you out for a victory. We had a tie game last week.
We did.
That was fun.
And I feel like it was a pretty high scoring tie too. It wasn't like
95 to 95. We each only
tight.
had one miss.
Yeah.
But this will be fun. So this is well, you didn't give me your theme right away, but oh well. These are pop stars.
Okay.
And the first one is easy mode, as I kind of tend to do.
Cool.
But it's Stephanie Joanne Angelina Germanotta.
So that's Lady Gaga.
That's Lady Gaga. Mm-hmm. So the theme is current pop stars that are still active. Okay.
Cool. Got it.
Okay. Name number 2 is Elizabeth Woolridge Grant. Elizabeth Woolridge
Katy
Grant.
Perry?
It is not Katy Perry. I believe Katy is, I think she's a Catherine, or like Katy is.
Oh, it's actually her.
I thought so. I don't know about the last name, but so, okay. So my hint is that she initially, was an artist with a name that was much closer to her actual name that I just gave you, but kind of rebranded herself and had great success after rebranding herself.
Elizabeth Grant. Oh, Lizzie Grant. Lana Del Rey.
Is Lana Del Rey.
Yeah. Okay.
Nice.
That name sounded so familiar. Yeah, I was like, but I kept going to like Lizzie McGuire, Hillary Duff. I was like down this like weird thing of like that
down
doesn't
the
make any
Nickelodeon,
sense.
right?
Yeah, so weird. Yeah.
So that's 20 points for that one.
Yeah, 20 points. Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully getting a little bit harder here. And the next name is Robin Fenty. And that's Robin with a Y.
Well, I mean, the obvious one would be to go with just Robin. But I feel like you said it's hard mode. So
It's getting to hard mode.
yeah.
This is second to hardest mode.
All right. I would say Robin with a Y is probably going to not be the just solely titled name Robin, because that would be too easy for hard mode. I'm going to say it's... No, I was going to say Robin Thicke, but I know that that's his real name because he's related to Alan Thicke, and that's his real name.
Is that his real name?
I think it is. I'm pretty sure, because I think he's related to Alan Thicke, and I think Alan.
Oh, I know. I didn't know if Thicke was their real last name.
Yeah, maybe it's
kind of how you've got like Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen.
Yeah, no, that's true. Actually, I didn't. Even
I don't
think
mean
of
to
that.
throw you off the trail here,
fine.
but because you never know with this game.
Fenty. I think I'm gonna need a hint or a genre or something.
Okay. Well, we know a genre because these are all pop stars.
Right. Okay.
So Robin Fenty has a middle name, and the middle name is her stage name.
Oh, okay.
Oops, I just said her.
Yeah, I was gonna say. All right, so I got the gender, so it's not Robin Thicke.
Right. So Robin Fenty has a middle name. I'll throw you another bone. If I'm not mistaken here, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but I believe she also has a fashion company of some sort. And Fenty is the name of the fashion company. I'll have to verify that really quick, but
Right. And so her middle name is her stage name, so it's a singular name then.
yes, and I was right about that. So her last name, Fenty, is the name of a fashion house founded by the artist.
I didn't even know there. I've heard of. Is it with a D? Fendi?
Fenty with a T, Fenty.
But then there's I know Fendi has it. Okay, interesting. I didn't even know there was Fenty clothing. Huh.
I don't know if it's clothing. It's a fashion house of some sort.
Okay.
I don't know anything about that world. Sorry. It's not my forte.
Yeah. I'm gonna go Halsey. Because we were just talking about her.
It is not. That's
Okay.
pretty good guess. But
She should have a clothing line.
So this artist is of, I'm going to say it wrong. Hold on. She is of Barbadian descent. She was born in her home country of Barbados.
Okay. Is it Rihanna?
It's Rihanna.
Okay, nice. Wow. She's like fashion line. What's it? Robin Fenty? Okay.
Robin Rihanna
Wow.
Fenty is her name. And Fenty is her fashion company.
Interesting. Okay. Wow.
So that's
All right. That was hard mode.
15? Does that two guesses? Okay. So is it time? Is it tie game again for now? It is.
Well, it could be. Yeah.
Because you nailed the first one.
I think that puts me at 60.
So you have to.
So I could.
You have to get 20 to tie.
Yeah. I'd need nothing but net to take it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think this is hard mode. Hopefully.
Okay. Yeah. You never know.
So this artist's name is Abel Makonnen Tesfaye. I can spell it for you if you'd like.
Yeah, please. Well,
Abel, Abel, and then
Okay.
Makonnen, Makkonen, and then last name is, I guess, Tesfaye, Tesfaye. These are pop artists.
Abel.
You need a home run to win it.
Yeah, and I don't know this off the jump. Abel. A-B-E-L?
Abel, which, as far as I know, is the traditional spelling of that.
Yeah, that's
name.
what I'm saying. I mean, it's not anything weird that like.
And I'll just give you that there's really no hint to the actual artist name in the name here.
Okay.
Doesn't help, but
Yeah.
might help you with process of elimination. But there's nothing in this name that would allude to the artist name. Pretty big artist.
Big artist. I really feel like I'm gonna. I feel like I'm gonna guess someone that we've probably done before. I don't know, because we've done this a bunch of times, and so my head goes to like Bruno Mars, and I'm like, I think we've done Bruno Mars already, and I don't
Yeah, and I think you're the one that.
I might have done him. Boy. Let's see. Massive artist. I am gonna go Drake.
Oh man, that's a really good guess. It is not
I
Drake.
have no idea what his name is. Okay.
I have an assumption that Drake is somewhere in his real name.
You think so?
So I'm gonna give you a hint too, and you're gonna have an opportunity here to tie it up.
To tie it up. Yep.
This artist, big artist, kind of recently was I'm going to give it away. They recently had a performance that was broadcast to an enormously huge audience during an annual event of great importance, at least in this country.
Well, in this country, so it's not the Olympics, but there's not any music in the Olympics anyway. It could be the Super Bowl halftime show is 50 Cent, Eminem. It's not those guys. Who else is at the Super Bowl? I think Kendrick's his real name. There's like Oscars, Golden Globes, Grammys, could be all that.
Doesn't have to be from this year.
Oh, okay. Doesn't have to be from this year. I wish I paid more attention.
I'm like on the edge of my seat here.
Yeah,
the tension is palpable.
Big
event, annual event, at least in this country.
It's got to be the Super Bowl then, because I'm trying to think, like, is there anything else? I feel like I watch some of the performances like around Thanksgiving. What is that, the Rose Bowl or something, where they have performances? But you must be talking about the Super Bowl, and I'm trying to think of who performed at the Super Bowl prior, because there was that like Coldplay year that everybody was like bummed about.
Well, it's not Coldplay.
Came out, so it's not Coldplay, but the people came out during it. Like I think didn't Big Boy come out because it was in Atlanta? But we've done Big Boy. No, it's not him. Who else played the Super Bowl?
You know this.
Did The Weeknd play the Super Bowl? The Weeknd played the Super Bowl. It's The Weeknd?
Yes,
Is it The Weeknd?
Yes.
It's The Weeknd. Dude, his CD's in my car right now.
And like somewhere I knew that you knew it. So I'm sitting here like on the edge of my seat, like clinging to the armrests on my chair.
Did
like,
he do the Super Bowl last year?
Yeah,
like,
he did. He was the headlining Super Bowl artist last year.
That feels crazy to me. I like The Weeknd, but that feels crazy to me that he was the Super Bowl headliner. That's wow. I mean,
yeah, there was a lot of people that was like, "Who's that guy?" And like, it was actually one of the more enjoyable Super Bowl performances in my memory.
I don't know if I watched it. I feel like I got to go back and watch it. I don't know if I actually watched it last year.
I enjoyed it, and I'm not even really. It kind of turned me into a fan.
Yeah. I've been hooked on that song that he did with Kendrick for Black Panther. Just listening to that on like driving my kid around. We're listening to like was it Blinding Lights and a few others. Like I have his greatest hits in the CD player, but I keep going back to that song with Kendrick because it's just so good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we got another tie game.
Is it? I feel like I don't know. I think you've eked that one out because technically, like you gave me a little bit extra with that.
I always give a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you could call it a tie, but I feel like
I was about to say Super Bowl performance, and I was like, "Oh, that's gonna completely give it away."
But you basically told me Super Bowl the moment you said to this country, because I was like. The Olympics had like some things that would happen, but not really. Like I was trying to think what else there could have been. So yeah.
Well,
cool.
Anyway, it's just for fun, and it's always a good time. But so we'll have to have at some point. We'll have to have one of us break the tie streak at some point.
Yeah, it is pretty funny that we keep tying it up.
That was these last two episodes we tied it up. So
yeah.
We'll have to see if someone can come out on top next time around.
Yeah.
But it's just all for fun. And we've had an enjoyable first side of this episode. And at this point, we're going to flip it over to side B, and we will get
We're going to Jurassic Park, dude.
We're going to Jurassic
Hogwarts.
Park. We're going to
We're going to a
Hogwarts.
galaxy far, far away.
We're going to Tatooine.
We're going to Chicago to fight the Wet Bandits. That's right.
That's right. Yeah. He did that too, right?
He did Home Alone. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah.
We're going to have Alfred Shulz joining us to talk about John Williams. And as we kind of, as I typically like to do when we have a guest on, I'm going to take a little bit of a back seat and let the guest,
chat it up.
Take the reins a little bit. And we'll definitely go down memory lane with some childhood favorites and some of the most iconic musical movements of the past century. My goodness, him being 90 years old. So let's flip it over and we'll come back with some John Williams talk. Welcome back. We are finishing up our 21st episode. We're old enough to drink now. And
that's awesome.
I'm excited to have a guest on, and he is here with us now. Alfred Shulz, friend of the show, and really, really happy to throw in, a third opinion. A triangle is always a strong shape to have, and so we like to have some outside opinions and have our thoughts and views challenged and learn new things. So we're happy to have him on. How you doing, Alfred?
Adam, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited about this, so thank you.
Yeah, and we kind of do this on the beginning of the first side, but since we got you now, anything cool or interesting that you've been listening to lately, or any like recent album purchases or anything like that?
Do you buy stuff, Alfred?
I was buying things a lot until kind of recently, where unfortunately I got sucked. I was so against getting into Spotify, and when I moved out to the suburbs, I unfortunately got into Spotify. So I've bought less and less music.
Wait, you wound up with more space ostensibly in the suburbs, but then stopped hoarding? What's
weird is that the way things shaped up, like I had my CDs set up all in my apartments throughout my entire life, and there's no space for my CDs here. Because they would have to go in the basement, and literally there's no space for them. So we will figure that out. But that's a very depressing situation.
You still have them though?
Yeah, they're in a crate next to me, like the Ark of the Covenant sitting right next to me. And,
oh man,
they shan't be opened unless you want the angel of death to come and kill you.
A basement isn't the worst place. I'm just saying.
I love having a basement.
I'm down in it now. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, it's the best. I just want some space for those CDs because they're such conversation pieces, and so many of them I'm embarrassed by, but I always love having them up.
I miss having a basement. I'm a transplant down here to Texas, and I come from New England, and there's so much you can do with the basement. So
it's great.
Storage.
When we bought our house, it was just like an empty slab. They hadn't done anything with it, probably because it at one point would get water damage. So there was that. But like once we've solved that, like was able to unpack all this stuff and have it up, and it's kind of nice to hide down here around it all. I'm glad you still have your CDs. That's fun.
You're the
love
only one
mine
glad
too.
about that in my.
I know that's true. Yeah.
So thank you.
I'm sure. So I'm super excited to have you here. Like I had said before we started rolling, like you always had great insights. I always appreciated your taste in music. You made really cool playlists for different occasions. you and I used to geek out about this and that. I feel like I know a lot of people who are fans of the Beach Boys, but nobody who's a fan of the Beach Boys like you. I feel like Black Crowes, I know a bunch of Black Crowes fans, but nobody who is a Black Crowes fan like you.
I got some problems.
But you had mentioned at one point on Twitter how great you thought John Williams was and how important you thought he was. And that struck a chord with me. We play a game on here, Alfred, where we're not going to play it now. Don't worry about it. But we'll throw legal names at each other to see if we can figure out who it is.
Yeah. I like that game.
And it was fun. And Adam threw one at me, and I blanking on his legal name to this date, Adam. But it was Jamie Foxx, who that's not his real name at all. And Adam would give me hints like, I mean, he basically spelled his name for me. Couldn't. It was like Quentin Tarantino and singer, and I was like, "What? What are you even? Who is that? That
and
can't
the
be
whole
anybody."
biopic
What are you
thing.
talking about? Yeah, walked through the whole thing with me. I have terrible taste in movies. I haven't watched a lot of movies. I'm sitting here staring at a framed poster of The Postman, starring Kevin Costner. So that's my movie taste. Great cameo by Tom Petty in that film, I must say. But a 3.5 hour post-apocalyptic opus.
Well, just what a weird choice that was for him. He got killed for doing a post-apocalyptic underwater movie, and then he's like, 2 years later, you know what? Let's try the post-apocalyptic thing again with The Postman.
Going all in.
Like,
yeah.
what?
This time I'm going to do it
That's never really
myself.
been done before.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I like Waterworld too.
I kind of like Waterworld.
Yeah,
it's fun. So we're going to talk about John Williams a little bit. I think I tried to go back and find the tweet, but I think that you had kind of framed it like there's no denying that he is the king when it comes to like movie competencies, film scoring, anything along those lines. Is that your opinion, or am I phrasing you wrong on it?
You know, I think especially during the pandemic, we've all had times to overanalyze in fun ways pop culture, and I think things like the Last Dance about Michael Jordan, and even like the Beatles documentary, where you're really thinking about, you know, the term "goat" is overused to a nauseating point. And I think that it is interesting to sort of think about, all right, is there a sort of the closest thing to a platonic ideal of a profession or of like an artist? And truly John Williams, if you're going to really try to look for the best who's ever done film scoring, it's got to be John Williams. It's on, and like, there's definitely a lot of people who are up there, but just the impact John Williams had and how he affected the masses in the way he has, and the success that he has, and the, you know, longevity, you can't really beat him on any category.
Yeah. And I don't want to, I guess it's the worst way to start this conversation off about John Williams by talking about people who are not John Williams, but I'm going to go for it.
Please.
Because when you posted that, I was like, well, is he right? Danny Elfman, right? Like, all the Tim Burton stuff, Good Will Hunting, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Mission Impossible, right? Hans Zimmer, Dark Knight Trilogy, Pirates of the Caribbean, Lion King. James Horner, who like was ride or die with Ron Howard, right? Like he did all Apollo 13 and all that stuff. He also did Willow, which was great.
Glory.
And then Glory, you're right? And then Jerry Goldsmith, an old school guy, but did Poltergeist, The Mummy, Gremlins, Alien, Mulan. Like, so there are some who have that track record. They also, it's interesting when you look at John and his relationship with Spielberg. It's not uncommon. Then you look at these other massive composers, and they all have kind of aligned or work in some sort of synchronicity with prestigious directors, and it makes sense that they would partner up.
Yeah.
But when you look at that track record, and then you look at John Williams, and it's Star Wars, Indiana Jones,
oh my God,
Home Alone, Jurassic Park, Jurassic Park, Harry Potter. It's kind of undeniable, right?
I mean, in Jaws, he got to
Yeah.
start with Jaws, which is like, when you think about it, could have easily been the equivalent of a one-hit wonder, because there's so few notes in that main sort of riff of the overture, I guess, for Jaws, and you're like, all right, well, that could be just luck that he came up with that sort of super just emotional set of notes that, can he really carry? And then like he does Star Wars, and it's like unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable.
But Jaws is often celebrated as like the originator of the quote unquote summer blockbuster, right? Like that was the first one that was ever like, that's a thing, and it's carried through to this day. And again, I've only seen it once or twice, so I apologize for diving into the deep end for a shallow ender. But like, it seems like obviously the story is fantastic, the direction is amazing. Like, what a simple thing that can just instill terror. But there is something to be said about the impact that score had when you're in the theater. Like Jaws, I don't know if you've watched Jaws at home. It's still scary, but I saw it in the theater at one point, and it is terrifying in a theater with that surround sound, right?
Sure.
I don't have surround sound at home, but when you're immersed in that dread that he paints as everything's happening, it'll get your heart racing in a special kind of way. So then you mentioned Star Wars, obviously, and he's done all of them, right?
Yeah.
Like every single one of them. We talked about not The Mandalorian, though. That's, what is his name? Ludwig Göransson of Childish Gambino fame, and now he's just done, he's done tons and tons of things. He seems to be like the new heir apparent to that world. But aside from The Mandalorian, his themes were used in a ton of different Star Wars movies, but did all 9 main lines and contributed to Rogue One and some of these other offshoots. Were you always a Star Wars person?
Yeah,
Alfred,
I don't remember the first time I saw Star Wars. I had older brothers, so like movies like Jaws, Indiana Jones, Star Wars, I don't remember seeing them for the first time. So I would have friends later in life, and like even my wife Holly, she, like when we first started dating, she's like, I've never seen Jaws. I'm like, oh, how is that humanly possible?
Right.
So I made it my goal to make sure she saw Jaws. So yeah, Star Wars was huge. Like we had the toys. You couldn't escape it. I think we first recorded it off a TV. So the first version we had like old commercials from like the mid '80s, and then we got the special edition VHS or whatever. And then of course, it's been, I've had various copies of the original 3 Star Wars my entire life.
Yeah. So I don't know if you remember your first experience then, like looking at the music or like having the music kind of become something more than just the texture that is painted in those films. For me, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I remember it being stark for me when on Total Request Live, aka TRL on MTV, when episode 1 came out, the main theme of Star Wars within episode 1 was on TRL, and I was like, what is happening? Like, this is so crazy. And I remember it kind of hitting me at that point where I'm like, oh, music? Like, it doesn't have lyrics. I'm not going to sit and play a guitar and, cry or whatever. But music is moving me in other ways that maybe I'm not even recognizing in 9th grade. And it kind of washed over me at that point where I was like, all right, film scores, cinema, this is a whole thing. Thanks, Carson Daly. This is fantastic. So I don't know if would you say Jaws is the first time that you feel like you kind of recognized that film scoring has an impact that you're aware of, or is there something else that you can think of? I think
a few things was always Star Wars was the thing. I just remember that, the main title, but a movie you haven't mentioned yet that I think deserves to be in the conversation, that as a kid, I remember thinking I would confuse the two, was the Superman theme. which is amazing and like gorgeous and like so iconic. And it's almost like lost in the conversation a little bit. But that was such an amazing score. But really, you mentioned Danny Elfman. I probably being a Batman fan of like the TV show as a kid, like a little kid, and then seeing that movie, and
which you probably shouldn't have seen, by the way. I don't know when you saw it, but like those theater. Movies were.
I was real little,
kind of dark. Yeah,
it was '89. I was 7 in the theater. Yeah. So, you know, I remember knowing that the music was so serious, and I guess the way I would have thought of it was like adult. I'm like, this is this guy wearing a cape, and this song and that like sort of opening march was so adult. And I remember thinking, that's weird that a comic book, like cartoon hero is now getting the same treatment as like an epic film.
Yeah. What about you, Adam? Do you have any recollection of like when film music might have hit you at all?
Well, it's interesting and it seems to, at least for me and most of, the friends that I grew up with, John Williams' music kind of just permeated outside of movie watching. Like, who hasn't been in the pool or the bathtub and like got real low and started going da-da, da-da, you know what I mean? Like that, everybody knew. I mean,
I suppose I have.
With those two little notes, like, what that means. That means that there is a stalking shark. And that's so iconic even to this day. I mean, if you've seen Jaws, you know what that is. And then even the Star Wars music to a certain extent, when you're playing outside with your friends and these fanfares are just kind of playing in your head, I can't really think of any other film or television music that became such a part of our outside of viewing, playtime. Mm-hmm. And there's the Indiana Jones theme, which has a similar kind of adventure to it, outside pretending to be running away from a giant boulder that's rolling after you, all that kind of stuff. With as serious and tense as it can be, there's always a playfulness to his music as well, which I think just lends to it, may be part of his relationship with Steven Spielberg, or just part of the genius of his scoring, or just how he thinks of and creates these beautiful compositions. But the playfulness of it comes out, and kids don't typically come away from a movie with the score as now part of their like internal upbringing. And John Williams did that for sure.
Yeah. Well, so there's a thing, and again, I know a bit about classical music, but not a ton, but I know that there's a thing that was kind of established by Wagner called Leitmotif, which is the kind of musical voice that you give to certain characters, or just certain like having that theme. I think he's kind of gone on record, and there's been lots of iterations upon that, and he's kind of taken that approach and brought it, I think, to our media and our generation. Mm-hmm. But like when you were describing the Indiana Jones thing, I hear dun 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 dun,
exactly.
Dun, like I hear it. And when you talk about Jaws, I hear that. And when you talk about Jurassic Park, I hear it. Like there are things that are just like almost conditioned by him into our memories that go entirely with the stories and the visuals that we have, which is, I think it's pretty unique. Because talking about Danny Elfman, I love the Tim Burton movies, but I don't know if I would remember Edward Scissorhands' theme. Like I don't know if I can think of all that kind of stuff off the like just like at the drop of a hat.
I think maybe the Batman theme is the only thing that I could actually like hum and remember.
So I do want to talk Spielberg a bunch, obviously, but I want to go back to Star Wars real quick, because one thing that kind of strikes me about that, especially when you think about the time it was, right? So we're talking, it was shot in the mid 70s, came out in 77. That, to me, just like any other sci-fi movie film series around that time, probably should have or could have been very synth focused. It could have been tech leaning. It could have been the Moog. I still don't know how to say it, but any of those synths. I mean, I think of Switched on Bach, which was this huge successful album that was like 9 years before that. Like, how you could not look at Star Wars and say, let's do that. It's pretty inspired for both George Lucas and for John Williams to have sat down and be like, we want to embody this classic, like Robin Hood, like that kind of Buck Rogers. It's an adventure. It's the space opera of it, right, and not that like elevated sci-fi thing. It wasn't a Kubrick-esque deal. It was fun, and then you see him then carry that on with Spielberg. I keep going towards campy because there's a campiness to all of it, but I don't think it's camp. I think it's just fun. I think it's like it's serious and it tugs on your heartstrings, but at the same time, it's adventure and it's fun and it feels like an amusement park ride. And then he scores that.
Yeah. Well, there is a certain amount of campiness to particularly the original Star Wars, because it was done, and a lot of younger folks might not really even know this, because the newer Star Wars films are just some of the most massive and hugely funded films ever. But particularly that first Star Wars was an absolute shoestring budget put together with, toothpicks and bubblegum. I mean, such a huge undertaking with no budget. And I don't know if you've seen some of the like making of documentaries about Star Wars, but when you see like a lot of the early footage and there's no music back to it,
right,
it is silly. Like it's just straight up like goofy. And not even necessarily in a good way, but it's like you take that same scene, and the one that keeps coming to my head is Luke and Leia in the Death Star swinging across, what I mean?
Oh my God.
And the whatever it is, the nothingness below them. And with music, it's the most epic thing. It's like one of the high points of the movie.
Yeah.
And that absolutely gets credited to John Williams and his music.
I think it's also interesting to note a lot of things that you guys touched on, where it's like 77 kids going to see that movie. And to your point, Liam, of like, there's no synths. There's no, like, so many of the movies of those times tried to sound of its time, which made
or futuristic.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Which immediately dated them 5 years later.
100%.
And the Star Wars is so interesting because it's like one man's vision, but also like he made a lot of great decisions, but he also made a lot of not great decisions that were sort of fixed by other people. And that's why the prequels, I think, have a lot of problems, because no one said no to him and he was just allowed to do whatever he wanted. Because like with Star Wars, to your point too, like he also made it lived in. And because they didn't have a great budget, nothing was slick, and it sort of looked lived in. And so it looked so natural, which was the opposite of every other futuristic film ever before it.
Right.
And also to the point of like making of and like it looking silly, he did a screening of a Star Wars with Spielberg, Brian De Palma, Martin Scorsese, and I want to say Coppola. And
that's a heavy room.
Yeah. And they were all in the room, but it was a rough cut. So that all the special effects weren't there yet. So he used like old B-roll from like World War II and World War One. And I don't think the music was there. And it was he had done, I think, that edit, and it bombed. His friends were like, Brian De Palma apparently stood up afterwards and goes, "What the hell is this? I don't know who these characters are. I don't know what the hell I'm looking at," and got mad at him to the point where he apparently was the inspiration for the scroll in the beginning. like because that set up who the characters were, sort of. And then, by the way, then Lucas, even though like it was technically his decision, but he didn't do it. He had his wife edit it, and she fixed the movie, saved the entire movie apparently. So
no way,
it's a weird collection of like luck and talent and getting John Williams, and that explosion of sound in 1977 in the theater when you first see it. It says Star Wars, and speaking of Wagner, like that epic like riff, for lack of a better word, it just blew people's minds. And it's great because I wasn't there, but it's great reading about the people that did see it in the theater, not really knowing what to expect, and just nonstop. And that music is such a big part of it.
Yeah. Going back to movie theaters that we probably shouldn't have been in, I saw Jurassic Park in the theater, which is 93.
Yeah.
So I was 9. So that's also like a pretty bad parenting decision, or a great one. I don't know.
I was scared in that theater.
Yeah, that first opening thing where like the gate pops out and the guy gets pulled in, I was freaked out. Yeah. So you saw it in the theater too?
Yeah, Alfred? And for me it was a T-Rex. The T-Rex scenes were really scary in the theater because I was 10. I remember and I remember sitting next to my aunt, and I remember her grabbing my arm a few times, and I was like, oh, I don't like it when adults are scared either. So it was intense.
Yeah. Now, what I don't remember sound design wise, because I didn't go back and rewatch it, I haven't seen it in a little bit, is what the scoring is at those points. What I do remember, which is interesting, is the sort of like inspired, excited respite, like the upliftingness that you have when they first see the dinosaurs. Obviously, when they escape. Sorry, that's a spoiler. It kind of allows you to breathe a little bit. So the scary parts, the intense parts might not be heavily scored, at least to my recollection. But it definitely, like, once you got to music, you were taken away. It was like moving the story along, and it let you feel the emotions that you were feeling at that point, which is like, I think they're going to get away, or, oh my gosh, this Brontosaurus is gigantic. I can't believe I'm looking at this. Like, it definitely instilled that. It's so amazing that somebody could take an emotion and just bottle it and put it on a piece of paper and orchestrate it and have it so well communicated to you. Like, I don't know how any of this is possible. I'm often in awe of a songwriter just being able to write lyrics that are interesting, write a melody that's interesting to go along with it, then perform that live. Like, it's crazy. That all alone is just crazy to me. This is rocket science. Yeah. This doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how this is.
It truly is like he's a mad scientist with the what you have to do with an orchestra. And, and also, like, you have to work with the filmmaker. Like, it's not like he just, like, wrote a song and he's like, oh, here it is. It's like, no, it has to, like, fit the film. Like, they're making the music and the film at, like, similar time. Like, it's a crazy symbiotic relationship he has to have with the filmmaker. But, and going back to, like, the Jurassic Park, like, and who better to score that movie? And, you were talking about kids with Star Wars today and how it's very different. And that movie was so like the awe-inspiring, all of it. Like when Grant is looking up and sees a dinosaur, an extinct animal he's been obsessed with his whole life, and the reveal and his astonishment with John Williams' score and Spielberg's direction. And as a viewer, we had never seen those special effects before, ever. And like kids today, and I hate saying that, kids today, but like, it's CGI is just a fact of life every second of life almost.
Anything is possible now. So
exactly. That was such an awe-inspiring moment, truly awe, like the actors, the filmmaker. It was such that moment is such a big deal, and seeing that in the theater and having that communal experience with that music, like who better to write the music for a moment like that?
Yeah, we're all so lucky to have had that experience too. That's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, everything aligned. This thing happened. We were in the movie theater for it and got to have this one of a kind situation. And again, I've watched the Jurassic Park movies again. I still love them.
Yeah,
they're good on my TV. But there's nothing like I remember being in that movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the impact that it had on me. I know why I'm still a fan, and it's because I had that moment.
Yeah.
It's like our generation Star Wars. It's that kind of experience because it was such a leap in filmmaking.
And so what's interesting there then, and as three dads talking here, I don't know where y'all are at on all of this, but Harry Potter has taken over this household.
Interesting.
We are like in full Harry Potter mode. The cadence is we read a book, and once we're done with the book, we watch the movie. And so I've seen the movies. I don't think I saw most of them in theater. I definitely didn't see like the earlier ones in the theater, which I'm kind of bummed about now because as I'm sitting here watching them through my daughter's fresh eyes, I'm having another John Williams moment. Like I know the story, the actors are incredible, the presentation is stellar, and I've got this guy who has written the 50th hook that's now in my head. How did he do this?
Right.
And now he's doing it for my kid. Like, man. And so, Alfred, I'm guessing your daughter's probably a little too young for the Harry Potter stuff, but like, you may have that happen soon. Like, you might have this fresh, amazing John Williams moment as a dad. Like, that is so cool.
That's very cool. We're not there. We're at a very frozen period right now.
Sure.
Both metaphorically and literally frozen. It feels like we're frozen. But yeah. Oh, and I mean, just the fact that like I'm not the biggest Harry Potter fan. I've seen all the movies, but yeah, it's like you. I didn't see them in the theater. I think I just saw them kind of randomly
on TV because they're always on TV.
Yes, and I think one thing that's really interesting about that score too is like you don't even think about John Williams. It is such a good like overture or whatever theme that like it is just Harry Potter. You see Harry Potter in any commercial, any reference, you hear those little notes, those little twinkly notes, and you know it's Harry Potter. You're not even thinking about John Williams. You're almost not thinking about the movie. You're thinking about Harry Potter, which is like an amazing feat. What was he in his 70s, 80s when he did that? Like, which is insane. Like, he was, and it doesn't sound like Jaws. It doesn't sound like Indiana Jones. It is an entirely different thing. And he, you know, you almost don't want to say he reinvented himself because like it's John Williams. He's always doing something great, but like, wow, like that is so iconic. Like, and to future generations, that will be probably his biggest like feat when you think about it.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, Star Wars has had this resurgence, and so I think that will always live on. And Home Alone is great every Christmas.
So great.
And like, I feel like I need to constantly remind myself that within all of this great adventuring and the Superman and the Indiana Jones and all that, there's Kevin McAllister.
Yeah.
You know, like he's got his house and he has to defend it. And somewhere in my memory, it's top 5 John Williams songs for me. I think.
It's great.
Like, it's so good.
What a silly movie that could have had a different vibe musically. And you just are like, all right, this is like maybe at the time, like $60-70 million movie. And it's just sort of like, whatever. Like, yeah, it was really fun. That music grounds it and makes it so it raises the stakes so dramatically that movie is like you watch like so an equivalent would be like The Great Outdoors or like other sort of John Hughes movies before that are like, oh, kind of fun comedies, whatever. But like the seriousness of Home Alone and that music, it's funny.
The heartstrings.
It's incredible. And so like, it is an instant classic because of a lot of things, but largely because of that music.
I think it's the music heavily.
Yeah.
I think so too. Like there is something about rooting for a kid and the funness of the pranks and like
and Christmas too.
Yeah, and Christmas for sure. But there's also, I mean, maybe I'm just projecting, but there's definitely something in me where like I was left in a Caldor for a little while and I was like, yeah, my parents abandoned me. Like,
Man.
so there is like a relatability there that tugs at your heartstrings too, where you're like, man, if I were 9 years old and I was in that position, what would I do? But the music sweeps you through that whole thing where you are more than just there for some pratfalls, right? Like, it is the slapstickiest of slapstick movies from that era, and it could be just a joke movie where someone gets burned in the face, and instead you're like he's running around outside the church, and the like Carol of the Bells is playing in this way, and it's just like the spiders crawling, and I can hear all the little beats of everything. Like, it's so good, and I love watching it every year, and just like being reminded that is another thing that John Williams gave us. Now, I don't really remember our discourse on this, Alfred. I know that I'm a Hook fan. I feel like you're not a Hook fan.
I think I have a complicated relationship. I remember the trailers for Hook were really good because they kind of made it look like almost like it could have been a horror movie a little bit, and they made it look very serious. And that was a big trend in the early 90s of like obviously starting with Batman, where things were dark, and it was like we sort of joke about that now with like DC, but that was a big thing in the early 90s. Like, there was a Robin Hood movie in 1990 where the Sheriff of Nottingham was a devil worshiper, and like there was like horrible things that happened in that movie, and it was super dark, like crazy dark. That people were being
Another
burned at the
Costner
stake.
vehicle, by the way.
By the way, underrated movie. So like things are dark, and the trailer for Hook was like, oh, they're gonna make like a serious Peter Pan movie. And so as a kid, I certainly enjoyed elements of it, and I certainly disliked a lot of elements of it. I don't think it ages great. I think it's not a great looking movie. I think Neverland was a massively missed opportunity. It's a kind of an ugly looking place.
That's definitely true.
The Lost Boys are very unpleasing in a lot of ways and don't really make any sense whatsoever. The music is
You don't like
phenomenal.
Rufio?
No, I hated Rufio. Always hated Rufio. Because I was like, who the hell is Rufio? How come he's not flying? I mean, can't they all fly? None of them fly except
they
for
should all
Pan?
fly. Yeah.
None of it made sense.
He's the only one. They make fun of him for not being able to fly, and then none of those kids can fly.
There's not a single steam.
What are you doing? Yeah. But they can pretend to eat imaginary food.
Which
They
was
do a really good
infuriating.
job of that.
Yes. These starving orphans. Like, come on. They're having a fever dream with food. That's not cool.
Yeah. But I think that you and I have found common ground on the fun cameos.
Oh,
right?
sure,
like
yeah.
Glenn Close as a male pirate, and David Crosby's in there somewhere.
And I think Jimmy Buffett's
Phil
one
Collins.
too. Phil Collins is in there. Yeah.
Phil Collins is the cop. Yeah.
And you know the couple
Spielberg.
floating at the end because they got pixie dust, they're kissing?
Yeah.
That is apparently George Lucas and Carrie Fisher.
What?
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh,
Really weird
that's
cameo.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Didn't know that.
I feel like the music's in that is good.
So
but
good. It's really good.
Yeah, I've gone back and I watched that thinking that my kid was going to love it, and she also didn't like it very much.
No,
So,
my daughter did not like that movie.
That's funny.
I think what it is I didn't see trailers for it. I just remember seeing it in the theaters, and it was just this like bright, weird, sometimes a little scary, but ultimately felt like nothing bad was going to happen. And then Rufio dies, and you're like, what? How can this happen in a movie? Because I was going to say that's 91, so I was 7. I don't know if I'd seen something like that happen in a movie yet, and like that's kind of heavy, you know. But the music in that movie is really solid. It's the best thing about that movie for sure.
Except for when the daughter has a singing part where you're like, is this a musical all of a sudden? What the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, she just has a solo song that makes no sense.
And that song is heartbreaking, though. If you like,
it's out of place, but yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we're talking about all these kind of shiny, fantasy-driven roller coaster rides, and then you get into Saving Private Ryan.
Oh man,
Schindler's List. Like, we've already said that John Williams is not a one-note person, and that like he can be very dynamic with the different things that he's doing, but this just brings it home. Like, to be able to just strip away any sort of camp, any sort of pomp, any sparkliness or whatever, and take a whole new set of emotions and deliver them on a plate to you for both of those movies. I'm definitely more familiar with Saving Private Ryan than I am Schindler's List. I've seen Schindler's List, but Saving Private Ryan for me, I mean, the thing that always struck me is, and I remember it, I think it was with Dunkirk too. So it was definitely a thing that's happened in a bunch of war movies where it's like the music is what kind of comes about when you're stopping and thinking and the story's moving along a little bit, but then it's stark when the fighting's happening and when the tension's there, because that's what it's supposed to be, immersive. And it just makes those moments of music then stand out that much more, because it's a respite, because it's a chance for reflection, because it's a kind of a chance to breathe before the next tense thing where a guy's going to get stabbed in the heart. And you're like, I don't know what's going to happen next, you know? Do you guys, I mean, I'll start, Alfred, are you a fan of either of those movies?
Yeah.
Do you have any?
I mean, they're hard ones to like rewatch. They're not exactly warm blanket movies that you would just put on to feel good on a Saturday night. But yeah. So I think one thing that's amazing about Schindler's List, well, there's many, many things, but people always talk about and give Spielberg credit for doing Jurassic Park and releasing Schindler's List the same year, which is
they were the same
insane, 1993. Isn't that bonkers? And that he gets deservedly so much credit for. He's like literally was directing one while editing the other, like insane.
How's that even possible? That's crazy.
It is crazy. But now think about this. Now imagine writing music for both at the same time.
Yeah, that's so what's hitting me now.
It's the same thing, you know. Like, so John Williams should get pretty much equal credit for that as well, because they're so starkly different. And like, how do you even begin to do music for Schindler's List? I mean, part of me would be like, you know what, have the artistic choice of like not having any music. But yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal music. It's incredibly heartbreaking. And also shows his versatility, because it sounds very Eastern European. It sounds, it fits the movie perfectly. And it's like Perlman's playing violin on it.
Yep.
And Saving Private Ryan is interesting because, like, yeah, it also shows like restraint, because the most famous part of that movie, there's no music at all, right? And that's very rare for a John Williams movie.
Yeah. It's pretty impactful when they can make that happen. I feel like that's kind of a Spielberg decision thing, because you see that in Jurassic Park too, with like almost the entire T-Rex attack scene. There's no music at all. And then when the music comes in, it's usually like, okay, now we're in the chase segment of that scene. To add to the Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, I would add Munich to that. And I don't know if y'all have seen or remember Munich, but oh man, what an incredible movie. And I feel like it kind of gets forgotten about a little bit. But that movie is incredible. And in the same kind of way, there's such a tense quality to the music. And, you know, it's not one that I would go back and I remember, melodies from it or anything like that. But that was a huge part of the intensity of that movie. And I think that one should be lumped in with movies like Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, because there's some really, really intense scenes in that movie. And and there's one in particular that I can think of where, there is no music whatsoever. And it almost makes it more impactful because of that. So that's always interesting to, I can't imagine making those decisions, being like, okay, do we put some really tense music here or do we have nothing?
I mean, it can ruin a movie, right? Like if the wrong sound direction in anything like that can completely destroy a movie, which is crazy to think.
It's true.
Yeah.
And you notice it like even like I love the movie Groundhog Day, but when it starts with like the music in the beginning, if you get lost, and then the movie I think picks up, but like you get lost in this sort of like early 90s, almost late 80s sounding like almost sitcom theme song that you're like, what kind of movie is this? How is this a good movie? And I love that movie, and it's interesting too, but it's also weird how like certain things were dated and feel less so. Like that synth sound that I remember spending so much of the 90s and 2000s kind of being like, oh, like The Shining sounds so dated. And Blade Runner sounds so dated, but now you watch them now, it is interesting how like that sound has certainly come back, like to the point where like Blade Runner sounds awesome now. And I was so distracted when I first saw it because I'm like, the music's so dated and like how can it sound like this? But it is interesting how like it did come back. I don't know how it did, but that synth sound did make a comeback.
Like that John Carpenter kind of synth driven thing. Yeah. And they would, when Stranger Things, the first one came out and it was this huge thing, it was like, oh, they nailed the music and it was legitimately good. But, it harkens back to a particular time period. Yeah. But even just by today's standards, it sounds fantastic. Yeah. It doesn't sound like, wow, this is boring and dated or anything.
Yeah. So speaking of The Shining, because I know I had mentioned Switched on Bach earlier, the woman who scored that movie, and I think she did Clockwork Orange as well, Wendy Carlos. Adam, just to tie this back in.
I have that.
And I'm also going to tie this into what, Alfred, you were just talking about. So Wendy Carlos did a parody of Peter and the Wolf with Weird Al Yankovic, which came out in the late 80s. It was nominated for a Grammy. It is impossible to find now. The CD goes for $150+. So you could have some gold sitting in those bins, just saying. Like, vinyl has really taken off, and there's a lot of things where I'm like, oh, why is that worth what it is? I think there's going to be some CDs that are going to be worth something. But yeah, there's this, and it's not on streaming services. It was a one-off with CBS back in the day,
weird.
And you can't find it anywhere. And she is completely reclusive. She's transgendered. She back in like the 70s, and she completely has basically shut down. And Weird Al put out a box set of everything he ever released a couple of years ago, except for that.
Interesting.
One. It's so weird. Wow. But anyway, full circle. So wait, you're holding Clockwork Orange there,
which is a crazy soundtrack. Crazy score. Yeah,
love it. I found this at a Goodwill.
Wow.
The electronic great. Ode to Joy is still like
That's
creeps
crazy,
me
right?
out beyond belief.
Yeah. All right. Well, to tie it all up with John, so we don't have to pick our favorites or anything here, but I feel like for where I'm at emotionally, where I am at historically, I think Jurassic Park is the one that sticks with me the most out of all of his stuff. I am a ride or die Jurassic Park fan. That theme, I remember playing it in middle school. Like, it was like there was always some sort of a John Williams thing in our middle and high school pops concerts because it was the thing to do. And I loved it. I loved being able to get up on stage with the orchestra or whatever and like play this song that I heard in a movie, and it sounded not as good, but it sounded something like the movie, and that was cool.
It was fun to play, yeah.
Not to put you guys on the spot, but I'm just wondering, like, is it Star Wars? Like, if you were to say to some stranger, like, what defines John Williams to you? Is it Star Wars? Is it Home Alone? Is it Schindler's List?
I think certainly Star Wars is probably, but like, man, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Adam, I think you were talking about like the boulder and like the adventure, like, oh my, like that movie too. Like, we've talked about all these and like, maybe we forgot about Indiana Jones. Like, that theme is ridiculous, and
every time he's swinging, he's swinging,
just
and it's
pure adventure.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
Every playground when you were a kid,
good.
I was Indiana Jones. Even if no one, like, every single thing was Indiana Jones, and like it was just so like in a way pure, and that music is so awesome, and so that might be my favorite, just because like I have just so many memories. There's something about obviously Star Wars is like a ginormous thing, but there's something about Indiana Jones being about one guy, and especially that first one is just so quintessential and wonderful.
That Vader March theme is something that you just say, like, if you're just messing around with your kid or whatever and you want an ominous thing and they have even the slightest idea or don't have the slightest idea, it's ominous no matter what.
Fair.
Like, you can just walk into the room pretending to be a bad guy and hum that, and it is like you're the villain. You're immediately the villain. Somehow he wrote villain in a classical score. But he also did that with Indiana Jones. You're right. Like, as you're saying that, I remember jumping off the playground singing that, like dun, 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 like jumping off a slide,
jumping off anything, going and climbing anything, running anywhere. It was Indiana Jones. He did all of that. You talk about the swinging scene in Star Wars. That's one scene. This was a movie where he's swinging on vines, swinging on a whip. It's like you made swinging such a big deal to be like a kid growing up. You're like, I want to. Everyone has a rope swing. You got to try it. Like, it just was such an important thing to want to swing on something.
Yeah. Adam, what about you?
It's so
Star
tough
Wars?
because those Spielberg movies were such a huge part of my childhood. I don't know that I could necessarily pick just one. I do think that it deserves mentioning, although it doesn't get nearly as much love these days, but E.T. we haven't talked about
really
yet.
good.
Well, so the reason we haven't talked about E.T. is because the best audio that you can listen to from E.T. is Michael Jackson's narration of the story, which you can get on full LP, and it comes with a really nifty poster of him hugging E.T. You should look it up. It's also it's not that expensive. If I'm remembering correctly, it was a package that they produced and released but didn't actually have the rights to it, and so it was on shelves for a limited time and got yanked.
Weird.
But you'd think that it was worth a lot, but they made so many of them that I think if you go on like Discogs or whatever, you can probably find one for like $40, and it's a nice little box. They put it together because E.T. was the biggest film that year, right? E.T. was a cultural moment that I missed, honestly. Like, obviously, I wasn't born yet at that point. Like, I didn't have that. But E.T. was the biggest thing, and Michael Jackson was the biggest artist, and so someone was like, yeah, just put them together.
Yep.
And so Michael Jackson, you got to listen to this audio if you've never heard it. He narrates the story in like audiobook form or like radio drama form of E.T. And it's Michael Jackson saying he pointed to the brightest, shiniest star in the night. Like, it is so good. Sorry, to take away from John Williams.
There's another Spielberg, Michael Jackson connection. Hook was initially supposed to be a Peter Pan movie with Michael Jackson. That was
it wasn't.
He and Spielberg were in talks of doing, like, because Michael Jackson had this
Neverland Ranch
obsession with Peter Pan and wanted to change his face to look like Peter Pan. And that was in the talks, and it didn't happen. So they obviously made a lot of changes.
So they gave it to Robin Williams.
Yeah. Makes sense. But they were trying to find some kind of vehicle for Spielberg and Michael Jackson.
Yep.
Nightmare.
I remember
that I didn't know.
Nightmare.
Sorry, Adam. E.T.
No, I'm just happy that we're talking about E.T. Because it's just seems like it doesn't get talked about in the same way that Jurassic Park or Star Wars or Indiana Jones gets talked about anymore. And maybe that's because there was only one and they didn't have an E.T. 2, 3, E.T. Returns. Like, that would have been really weird. And I don't know if that's the reason or what.
They had a video game.
Maybe the video game killed it. Maybe they're like, ooh, that just literally obliterated an entire industry. Let's not
bury them in the desert.
I think it was too sad. It was the first time I saw my mom cry was watching E.T. and I remember being like, that's weird. I remember thinking like,
movies aren't supposed to make you cry.
I don't know if I want to see this again anytime soon.
I will also say, and I mean, I loved that movie as a kid. I haven't seen it in a while, but I do remember a couple instances where I, even as a kid, just flat out fell asleep watching it. It's a bit slow. But I think it deserves a mention.
Oh, big time.
I can't just outright pick a favorite though. I mean, it sounds like Alfred and I are about the same age, and that was just such an incredible time for movies and adventure in particular. kind of straying off the path of John Williams a little bit, but movies like The Abyss and just like stuff that we had never seen before because now the technology allowed us to see it. Even talking about Star Wars like that, it was just a whole new time where the adventure movie wasn't something campy. It was something to be taken seriously and something that also could resonate with us emotionally. So yeah, it's Jaws, it's Star Wars, it's Jurassic Park, it's E.T., it's all of that. Also, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which we haven't really talked about yet, which interestingly does have some of that era particular synth sound in it.
A little bit.
Which perpetuates, whenever it's talked about or thought about today, because it's how they're communicating with this alien spacecraft. But I loved that movie as a kid. I thought
and that's
so
another one.
cool.
That's 77, which is also Star Wars, and Superman's the year after. So going back to what Alfred was saying about and granted, the split between Jurassic Park and Schindler's List is vast.
Right.
But Star Wars and Superman, sure, whatever. Close Encounters of the Third Kind is again another I think that was a trademarked set of tones or something like that. That you can't use that; it's copywritten or something.
I'm sure.
But that's a run of 3 incredible scores that are very different. Ultimately are not just copy and paste deals.
No.
They are well thought out, sculpted for those different projects.
And that's interesting because you mentioned, I think I shouldn't say the name, but I think it's James Horner. There's a couple of these people that do scores that are very successful that have literally done very copy and pasted. And there are I'm trying to think. I think it's James Horner that does Sneakers. And I remember reading somewhere, which is a weirdly underrated movie that I like. There's another movie that they're it's the same score. And I remember paying attention, oh my God, it's the same score. And he's literally copied and pasted similar riffs. And so some people do have not great reputations for this. And certainly there's similarities between Superman, Indiana Jones, and Star Wars here and there. But then you look at Home Alone, then you look at Jaws, it is so different. And obviously Schindler's List, it is, he's so diverse and while still being so epic and amazing.
Well, so there's a reason why he has won 25 Grammys.
Oh my God, that's insane.
Five Academy Awards, has the record for nominations,
most nominations in that
nominations
category,
of
right?
any person ever. It's at 52 nominations.
Jesus.
So pretty freaking incredible. Alfred, thanks for taking the time.
Oh, man,
I know we went a little long here, but this was super fun. Adam, you have any last thoughts or anything?
No, I feel like my last little statement is my finale there for the John Williams talk.
Nice.
It's hard to imagine that he's 90 years old.
Crazy.
And
it's hard to imagine that he just did another Star Wars movie. He was involved in the last one. Yeah.
So not to end on he's got some years in him to give us something else before he's no longer with us. But God bless John Williams.
Yeah. To end on I don't want it to be a downer, but very interesting. I recently saw an interview with him, and he takes almost zero pleasure in his own music, which that makes sense. A lot of artists are like that.
Yeah, fair enough.
But imagine all those movies now are ruined for him. You know what I mean? So what? He just takes no pleasure in Indiana Jones and Star Wars.
Nitpicks everything.
So sad.
Yeah,
I would have done that differently.
Yeah, I would have lived a life to be a fan of John Williams, not be John Williams, I think.
Yeah. I'm sure he's got plenty of other movies to watch. He can go watch all the Danny Elfman movies.
Exactly.
Those are fine.
Ennio Morricone and all the other ones.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, cool.
Awesome, man.
Thank
you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred.
And anytime that you have the opportunity, we'd love to have you back. Talk about whatever artist is on your mind. We can, we're
gonna have to do a Beach Boys episode. I mean,
was gonna
when
say
I
that
thought about
earlier.
it, when I thought about it, because it's such an expansive topic, and I was like, I'm going to ask Alfred to come on and talk about the Beach Boys. And then I saw that John Williams tweet, and I was like, nah, we'll do that some other time. I'm going to do John Williams.
Yeah. John Williams is more pleasant in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Beach Boys are probably the darkest
stories.
band ever, even though people don't realize that. They think quite the opposite. But yeah, no, there's a lot going on there.
Sounding songs. So
Yeah. Let's do a Beach Boys. So we'll plan on a summertime Beach Boys.
It sounds awesome,
cool
man.
with that.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
This is,
Cool.
obviously a blast. So
It's
thank
fun.
you so much
Yeah.
for including me.
Sweet.
And thank you for listening to Retro Groove. We are part of the RetroLogic network. You can find us on Discord on the RetroLogic server. You can also find us on Twitter at RetroGroove_pod and Instagram at RetroGroove_podcast. And until next time, may the force be with you.